Weekly update for Friday, July 19th, and welcome back. And welcome back to me at here at the White House, having just spent the last 11 days pretending that I was dead, so that Eddie Kana and I could workshop the succession, which went very well. I think it's going to be a very smooth process. Even smoother now that Eddie's had the chance to familiarize himself with the White House and its various functions. It was, as I say, it was interesting to pretend to be dead for 10 or 11 days, which is a little different from being made to not exist, which was also taking place at the same time. There was a comics gala in Hamilton, Ontario, at the Art Gallery, curated by Joe Ullman. And he decided, because of my views on women, that I would not be represented in this exhibition of Canadian indie comics creators. So that's, like I say, that's a little different. That's making people not exist because of their political viewpoints. And I think, it's really time for some folks to brush up on their Chairman Mao Cultural Revolution giant leap forward histories of where that leads when you decide as a society that what you're trying to do is to figure out the one right way for everyone to think and to eradicate and retouch people out of your picture if they don't share your opinions. Just to give you a rough idea of how weirdly ironic this was, I did hear from Ivan, who wrote the recent history of Canadian comics, that this was happening, and that was the first that I heard of it, where he said that James Whaley, who has always been a big supporter of mine all the way back to the Orb days in the 1970s, had pointedly asked Joe Ullman, aren't you going to have Dave Sim and Cerebus and Dave's other works in this exhibit? And was told flat out no, because of Dave Sim's views on women. I am unacceptable as a Canadian indie comics creator. And then of course, after the fact, I heard from the Bard of Hamilton. I always think of him as the Bard of Hamilton. Here's his first collection of poetry, Darrel EPS, Imaginary Maps, which I bought a few copies of. And After Hours, his follow-up volume, which is doing very big box office, particularly in Hamilton, Ontario, where he is definitely getting a reputation as the foremost poetic incarnation of the spirit of Steel City. So it was interesting that he left a series of phone messages while I was out of the White House, and Eddie Kana saved all of them, and basically saying the same kind of thing, that this really smacks of Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution kind of stuff, eliminating people from what they've done historically and their proper place in the order of things because you don't agree with their political opinions. And then kind of even more interesting, Darrel's wife, Dorothy, I was at their wedding 4 years ago, was in the interesting situation of being A, really not a comics fan, and B, Darrel EPS' wife, and see someone who has read Strange Death of Alex Raymond, which I loaned them one of the early copies of The Strange Death of Alex Raymond, and she relayed word that she thinks it's a matter of all of these guys are just jealous because I draw better than they do. So as Dorothy is a survivor of the Rwandan massacre and knows her whys and wherefores of political suppression, I thought it was interesting that she adopted this cut to the chase sort of approach, that it was simple jealousy because I draw, or rather drew, better than these other guys. I just want to further emphasize the irony of this, because I had wanted to contact Joe Ullman about his book, The Abominable Mr Seabrook, about Willie Seabrook, and find out if he would let me use panels from it in Strange Death of Alex Raymond, particularly a story that takes place between Willie Seabrook and the illustrator on his book, The Magic Island. And I think we know the answer to that one. Which, you know, I kind of hope that that wouldn't be the case, that we could separate politics from creativity and politics from collaboration, but I'm just sensing that that's not the case. But let me definitely say that I definitely strongly recommend The Abominable Mr Seabrook as a creative work, a very thick biography and covering all of the bases of William Seabrook's life. And I mean, that's the situation because it's a great book, not because I agree with Joe Ullman's opinions. There's many opinions that he exhibits in his work that I go, I can't really go along with that. That's I think that's kind of depraved. But you know, one person's depraved opinion is another person's truth. So hopefully that situation is going to prevail in the comics community in Ontario, in Hamilton, in Canada, and probably not, but we can always hope that that's going to be the situation. What was interesting was the added resonance of the fact that I was starting to write volume 3 of Strange Death of Alex Raymond while I was staying over at the Walper Terrace Hotel, and Eddie was here in residence. And we'll give you a quick look at the first mocked up page of volume 3 since I got back to the off-White House, which, oddly enough, features Willie Seabrook. The story of Alex Raymond's death in 1956, how it happened and why it happened, has many points of origin. Foremost among these is the Atlanta Journal. Years before Margaret Gone with the Wind Mitchell worked there, where in 1912, reporter, aspiring novelist, and future Alex Raymond collaborator Ward Green first met reporter, adventurer, future self-confessed cannibal, and lifelong obsessive bondage fetishist William Seabrook, who had been working at the Journal since 1909, the year of Alex Raymond's birth. Even before Raymond's comic art exists, even before Raymond himself exists, his comic art metaphysics fuses with the occult. Mr. Ward Green, who had been ill with typhoid fever for 2 months is able to be out again. Atlanta Constitution, July 28, 1909, 2 months before Alex Raymond's birth. A bond forms between Green and Seabrook owing to their shared interest in the occult. Both are, to varying degrees and at various times, occult skeptics, agnostics, and adherent practitioners. Seabrook, in a very public, exhibitionistic sense. Green, more secretly and circumspectly. Okay, probably not the most subtle page 1 of volume 3 that I could have come up with. But let's face it, the whole idea is to get people to read page 1 and really want to go on to page 2. So doubling back, let me again recommend Darrel EPS poetry. First volume, Imaginary Maps, was done through Signature Editions in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And his latest book, After Hours, is from Mosaic Press, which is actually in Hamilton, Ontario. And you should be able to get copies of the second printing or the third printing. It sounds like there's going to be a third printing on After Hours. And also recommended The Abominable Mr Seabrook from Joe Ullman, Ollmann, from Drawn and Quarterly. Hopefully still available from them or through Diamond Comic Distributors, or both. Okay, that'll do it for the weekly update this week. I hope we'll see a bunch of you next week for the July 26th. Oh, and don't forget that the postcard from hell, effing flimsy postcard from hell Kickstarter is coming to an end tomorrow as you're watching this. I'll be on Saturday, and I'll be visiting at the Kickstarter site to kibitz with everybody as we bring this one in for a landing. Okay, hope we'll see you next week.